I'll tell you who shook things up a couple of days ago, Chad Forbes at NFLDraftBites on Twitter. And he joins us now. Chad, how in the world are you doing, man? Thanks for the time today.
I'm doing fantastic.
Well, it's always great to catch up with you. I'm telling you, brother, you had Titans fandom in a little bit of an uproar a couple of days ago. A couple of tweets. You were talking about Mike Vrabel and the relationship with Carthon and the quote. Let me find it here. Fact is, Mike Vrabel has proven himself enough in the league to dictate the organizational structure. He'd get complete Sean Payton-like control from multiple organizations if available. Contract status is a bit cloudy, but a power play is underway. Mike Vrabel wants out of Tennessee. Woo! Man, what's going on? Tell us.
All right, let's walk back to the genesis. After the 2021 season, which was the 12-week campaign, they won 30 games the previous 3 years. I came out and said that I'd heard from a pretty reliable source there was friction between Vrabel and John Robinson. I think that's probably the last time I was on with you guys. You all told me I was crazy. And I said the same language. A power play is going to happen, right? Ownership's going to have to pick between the coach and the general manager. Ultimately, they chose Mike Vrabel, gave him some form of extension. And then when they fired Robinson, they made the interim Ryan Cowden, right? We go into the search last offseason. Vrabel thinks he's going to be the guy driving that search. And ultimately, they're probably going to hire, if he got his pick, Monty Ozenfort or Ryan Cowden. They go outside the organization, bring in a new general manager, and from that same source that said there was friction between John and Mike Vrabel back in 2021 is telling me that it's there again.
Man, so how strong of a power play do you think that Mike might be putting on behind the scenes? Because as you mentioned, there was one, and John Robinson left, so we're, a little over a year removed from that. I mean, is this thing headed to a showdown that somebody leaves town after this season?
No, it's not going to happen this season. Belichick's going to get kept in New England. Vrabel will stick around there for at least one more year, and then Kraft will do everything in his power to get Vrabel to come back to New England. And with Vrabel, he sees the control that Belichick had in New England when he was there. He's been in the college game where the head coach really doesn't answer to very much anybody. And all of a sudden, he's gone from thinking he's become the czar of the organization to back into sharing power with a general manager he's never worked with in the past.
Got Chad Forbes on NFL at NFLDraftBites on Twitter. You can follow him there for all the latest info he puts out.
Well, Chad, man, it seems like your sources are pretty solid, but I mean, how solid are your sources? I mean, are you that confident? Because you seem as though you're right on playing with everything that's happened. So it sounds like basically Vrabel got JR fired. And by the way, he had success with John Robinson's players up to 2021.
Right. Those two drafts there, the tackle from Georgia and Farley, really soured that relationship a bit. I'm not sure the dynamics of which one wanted which or certainly like that. But you see this, too, in New York with the Giants when there's friction between the coach and the defensive coordinator. When teams are losing, these are really competitive guys, and they get at each other's throats. So maybe this offseason they sit down and have a lot of time together and build a great rapport. That could happen, right? It could turn this franchise around. But ultimately, if you're Vrabel, he's really highly coveted around the league. And in that local market, I don't think you guys appreciate him enough, where if all of a sudden Mike Vrabel's available, I mean, teams are running after him the way they're going to get rid of run after Jim Harbaugh.
Oh, no question he'll be coveted, but still doesn't mean that he should actually deserve that right. So explain to me what makes a good coach.
What makes a good coach is being able to set a culture. And Mike has done that. He's got built a staff that's been pretty good over the years. They need to be involved in personnel. And, I'll tell you what, half the league doesn't know what makes a good coach. They get it wrong all the time, right? They bring in these new guys that don't have any experience, and they're surprised when they're firing them 2 or 3 years later. With Mike Vrabel, you've seen him do it. If he has the roster, he'll win games. And really, this is the first year where the roster just isn't there for him to win the games, but he's still being competitive in most of them.
You said he built a good staff. Outside of Arthur Smith, the O-line, he hired the assistant, and he's done horrible. He hired a new DB coach. The list goes on. The defense has gone backwards. And by the way, the offensive line has gone backwards not only this season, but from the previous season where they were horrible. And by the way, 3 years in a row, you can blame it on whatever you want to, the most injured team in the NFL.
Okay.
And knocked out all 3 of his quarterbacks.
we'll say a little bit of recency bias on the offensive staff. He is the same guy that hired Arthur Smith and Michael Floor.
He moved him up, yes. Mm-hmm.
And now the defensive staff he's got there is pretty darn good. They're doing a nice job this year. Wouldn't you say that?
No, last year the secondary was 32nd, and this year they're not too far off. And it gets the run, they've gone backwards.
In the league, though.
No, that
they're red zone defense in the league. I would say
the best defense in the league.
Roster.
Red zone.
Oh yeah, the red zone they are.
I would say the talent on the roster is the issue. And when you win 30 games in 3 years the way he did, people know you can repeat it. I think the talent's an issue. Maybe the staff isn't great anymore. It was certainly much better. I mean, if Arthur Smith gets bounced in Atlanta, bringing him back has to be a priority.
Oh, so you think Kelly didn't do a good job then as the OC?
No, I think he's doing an okay job with a rookie quarterback. Tannehill, I mean, they got the best out of him for when he was healthy. And, yeah, the offensive line, there's no defending that. And I'm not here to be, Mike Vrabel's biggest advocate, but that offensive line, I think that's a real reason there's some friction between Vrabel and Rand Carthon. He comes over and he brings in, Brunskill and the tackle, and those guys, frankly, have been atrocious.
Well, how do you view a lot of people on the inside there say that Vrabel had the biggest hand on bringing in Andre Dillard?
Dillard might be his pick, but we know Brunskill was brought in by Carthon.
Yes, he was.
And with Dillard, there was it's really hard to buy tackles in free agency. It can't be done. Orlando Brown was a great pickup by the Bengals. They probably should have been in on that market. But, yeah, I mean, Dillard is just, he got beat out in Philadelphia. And to think that, it was all because Mulatto was just a great player. Now, there was tape of Dillard. He wasn't a very good player. And they gave him $10 million a year. So they'll get out from that contract. And Skoronski hasn't been great. I mean, I'm an offensive line guy. I love offensive line play. And this group is tough to watch.
Yeah, no doubt about that. We're with Chad Forbes, NFL Draft Bites. I guess one more thing about your tweets, and that was kind of interesting here on the NFL's part in multiple organizations. I think you listed 4 organizations that they kind of put together. Kind of explain your tweet there with, I guess, the Bears, Detroit, and as well as the Titans and another organization.
The NFL has gotten really involved in managing the hiring process, not just presenting owners with candidates, but also even in the Titans situation, you hear, here were the finalists, right? Mm-hmm. Because once you become a finalist for the Titans job, it legitimizes you to be a hot candidate the next cycle, right? And what's happened with the league office is they're seeing that teams want to hire offensive coordinators, right? They know that, okay? And I would be the first to say, yes, they had a huge minority hiring problem 3 or 4 years ago, and they've done a good job of addressing that in the front offices. So some of these jobs, now Brad Holmes in Detroit has been fantastic, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's guys that have done a good job, no matter the color of their skin. But there's some guys that maybe weren't ready for these GM jobs. Rand Carthon might be one of them. Ryan Poles in Chicago, I'm not sure he was necessarily ready for that job. And, that's what people are saying around the league. I'm not out here to say it's definitive or
right.
Nobody wants to put their stamp on it in the media, but there is a little bit of an agenda coming from the league office, and everybody knows it.
Mm-hmm. There you have it, Chad Forbes, NFL Draft Bites.
So
that's it.
So you mentioned this, Mike. A lot of people here kind of have looked at New England as the key piece to the Vrabel puzzle. Like, gosh, whatever they do, Sunday night or Black Monday or whatever. But I want to go back to that because you just kind of said it and rolled right on. Like, New England's not going to do anything that you've heard with Belichick this year. It would all go down next year. Vrabel would still be here, and maybe at that time Kraft makes the play for him. So even on the New England front, which people are looking at as a key chess piece, you honestly don't think anything will change this year there?
No, I don't. Belichick comes back for one more year. He's going to look around and say, do I want to go to Los Angeles, and even would they have me? And that ownership wouldn't pay him what Robert Kraft does. So he stays one more year, keeps going after that Shula record, and eventually they'll find a new coach. But it's other teams, too. Like, if the Jets had any, sense of what's going on with their organization and they hear these rumors about Vrabel, why wouldn't Woody Johnson pick up the phone and call the Titans ownership and say, what do you think about moving the coach? So I think a lot of teams could have interest in Vrabel. I see him back in Tennessee in 2024. But just like that John Robinson situation, these things percolate, and eventually something could occur.
People talk about draft compensation for a coach that's under contract. What do you think Mike Vrabel would be worth to the Jets or the Patriots or to whomever who would want him the most?
Well, the Broncos gave up Rashawn Payton, the 30th pick in last year's draft, and a second in this year's draft. So, I mean, if you're the Titans and somebody calls you, you kind of got to ask for the same compensation, I think.
First and a second.
He has a Super Bowl ring, right?
Sean Payton does have a Super Bowl ring, that's for sure. So maybe it's a first and a third instead of a first and a second.
Another thing you had mentioned in your tweets, Vrabel's contract status being cloudy. He is still under contract, I believe, for a couple more years. What's the cloudy part there?
I think the last year contains an option. It's a mutual. There hasn't been a lot that's come out from his agent on that.
Yeah.
But people do believe that there's some ambiguities in the contract that's not necessarily been out there fully at this point.
Chad Forbes at NFLDraftBites hanging out with us here on Blaine and Mickey.
Well, great stuff there, Chad. But I guess I want to get into where I think the Titans need some help going into the draft. I don't know if you've gone into this yet, deeply, but I'll just say the top 3 offensive tackles and top 3 cornerbacks so far through your draft, looking at the draft so far with players. I look where the Titans are sitting at 7, and teams are going to be trying to jump ahead of them to get one of the 2 tackles, Notre Dame guy and the Penn State tackle. Mm-hmm. So they could kind of be sitting there at 7, not have a choice. You could have to go with them like a Malik Neighbors. Pass rusher won't excite you. You've got to fix that offense. But I don't see those 2 tackles getting to 7, and that could be a real challenge because left tackle is a major issue. I guess early, who do you think will be the top 5 picks? You got any guesstimate? I know where does Harrison Jr. go?
The 2 quarterbacks and Marvin Harrison Jr. go in the top 3. I expect the Penn State tackle to go either 4 or 5. And then it really comes down to, what team's there and what are the Giants or, someone want to do at 5. Maybe it's a Malik Neighbors or a Dallas Turner, the edge rusher from Alabama. It's still pretty early. But for me, the best 5 players in this draft, it's the 2 tackles, quarterbacks, Marvin Harrison Jr., and the LSU wide receiver. He's got a case to be made that maybe he could go ahead of one of the tackles.
Okay. And lastly, I'd love to get your thoughts. This is back to, MVP type player. And I want to say Lamar Jackson, but a lot of people are saying Brock Purdy. Do you think the system makes Purdy, or do you think Purdy makes the system better and operates it better?
Other guys like Nick Mullins haven't been able to operate as well as he had, right? But that doesn't mean you're the MVP. Right? For a quarter of a century, we've been watching football, and we've been seeing what the Shanahans have done with these quarterbacks, and they say, Brock Purdy's the outlier. And my response is, no, guys, John Elway was the outlier, right? Like, Brock Purdy's a ball distributor. He's doing a great job with weapons. But, Lamar Jackson, he's taken that organization on his back. And the way he played down the stretch in a tough, he's the MVP for me. I actually think number 2 should be Josh Allen. If he can win on Sunday night, that would really help his case. But Purdy maybe top 5, but, let's not anoint him MVP quite yet.
I got 2 more questions on the Vrabel. This is from the chat from different people, but why is the narrative that Mike Vrabel wants out? Like, how does that narrative come out when you're under contract?
Well, it's not necessarily that he wants out. It's just he's got friction with the general manager and ownership on the power structure, right?
It's just like a player, right? But
he's saying right now, either fix this, right? I want to hire my guy. I want to do it my way, right? It's a me kind of approach. Or let's look for an organization that will give me the type of power I deserve. And he believes that he should have the kind of power Sean Payton does or Bill Belichick does in New England.
Okay, reason why I'm asking that, because you kind of went back, is he has no options. They can sit there and say, no, we're going to sit here and we're going to, just like they do a player, and say, you want out, but we want you here, so figure it out.
Right, but in the last decade, we've seen with players, especially if they want out of a situation, it seems like the teams facilitate it. The NFL becomes more like the NBA every day. If you've got an unhappy coach who doesn't want to be there, I think the Titans will quietly figure out a way to move on from Vrabel and after the 2024 season.
Okay. And the other question is that Vrabel, has he lost a little bit of clout with now that the roster is pretty much changed in the 1 year 50% and he still hadn't gotten it done?
Right, and his clout's going to continue to decline if they struggle again next year, right?
Yes.
So everybody remembers those 30 wins in 3 seasons, that AFC game that he lost to Cincinnati, and they say he's a great coach, he can build a culture. They think of he's a guy that teams want to have in their building. Right, if you lose 13 games next year, the perspective on you is going to change, right? So maybe now it's his time, he thinks, to strike gold and get out of there, but ultimately he's probably back in 2024. I don't see the Titans making a huge radical shift, and you're right, he is under contract.
Right. 18 out of 23 he's lost.
Yep.
Oh, okay. All right, Chad Forbes.